welcome to our podcast session. Let's talk about art and labor with regards to other institutions, SCCA, Red Clay, and now Nkrumah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure talking to you on arts, culture, and all other matters that are involved. Yeah. I guess for myself, labor has been very important to the work that I've been doing in the last couple of years. Of course, I think that I've always been inspired by the work that people put into their everyday occupations. Yeah, in 2012, when I started the occupation series, which is one of the earliest large-scale installations that I was doing, which emerged out of my training at the art school in Kumasi, KNUST. Yeah, I was looking at like how labor had informed materials, objects like the jute sacks,
Yes.
yeah, and the transformation that they had gone through and what it meant actually for artistic production. Yeah. Subsequently, I became also more interested in the architecture and the history that was related to it. And then subsequently, I was also interested in acquiring those forms, those architectural forms, or building some of those architectural forms and somehow creating, let's say, a new path, yeah, or a new trajectory for art to exist and be experienced in a very different context or way.
And SCCA itself, I know the building was already there was not that much that was centered in terms of labor. That is what I see. But compared SCCA to Red Clay and Nkrumah, there seems to be like an intense labor force behind it. Anytime there's an exhibition or even daily, there's always this labor that is going on to it. What is the relationship between art and labor currently in your institution?
Well, the labor is very important. Yeah. Art, I don't think there's no difference between art and labor. I think labor is always implicated within art.
Okay.
And what it promises. Yeah. So SCCA, when we started building it, of course, a lot went into it, because in 2014, when I decided I wanted to move here to establish the institution, my father was very helpful and instrumental in making it happen. We had to build everything from scratch. Of course, Red Clay was a much bigger site, so a lot more had to go into it, much more expertise with regards to like the building of the structure with the bricks, the building of the structure with bricks and all that. The Nkrumah it needed a specific kind of labor, yeah, because first and foremost, it didn't make sense to invest into that entity, yeah, to transform a building which is at the verge of collapse, or actually a collapsed structure. Yeah, both politically, secondly, both physically, ideologically, and all that. Like the entire building had just been abandoned to die or to rot. But we needed a certain special kind of labor to be able to at least make that resurrection happen. And that labor was very unconstitutional in a way that you could never really think about it in a normal world with common sense. Yeah, you needed somehow to I don't know. Yeah, to reconstitute yourself, to reconstitute yourself and your thinking. And for me, I think that it was borrowed out of the labor that we put into both Red Clay and SCCA, even material-wise, because a lot of the materials that we used in like renovating the silo, like cement, blocks, were actually materials that were at Red Clay that we had to borrow in order to be able to make this intervention. So for me, I've always thought that labor is very important in a way that we really need to pay attention to it, because when you invest time, energy and effort into something, you always have to know that it has a much larger connection and implication to the general society, and what it means.
And I like that you mentioned politically. Not only the Nkrumah building, but the SCCA and Red Clay. Both these three buildings are also a bit political. They're kind of a political statement, directly or indirectly, to the development, not only infrastructure but also mental development to the people around here. One way or the other, do you feel like the political statements these institutions are making can have influence on the political discourse in northern Ghana going forward?
No, certainly I think it does. But for me, when I'm looking at politics, art has always been very political, and by politics, I don't look at it in terms of partisan politics. I'm looking at it in terms of real politics, in terms of the relationship between things, because by creating institutions like this, as we go back to the idea of reconstitution, you somehow help to build up a different set of ideas and mentality. Also regarding how people think and function, and people like children growing up, what's going to be the experiences of their society. Like these children here, imagine like their fathers even never saw what Nkrumah is, or never attended art exhibitions or went to technological shows, blah blah blah. So, and they've grown up with, let's say, certain cultural views and values. But imagine maybe these children being introduced to all these ideas. Imagine they will grow up thinking differently than what their parents were or thinking, and that is when there is a positive change. Actually, it's all part. That's when there's a cultural revolution, because there'll be a different generation that will make different choices rather than what their predecessors made. That's only when a society actually evolves. But by a lot of in politics here, there's always a lot of political jargons of this here and there. It doesn't really get anywhere. At the end of the day, it's almost as if we're going through a certain cycle.
Okay. And you mentioned culture, the culture like changes that is going to happen in the next few with these institutions. I was talking to Dr. Pelgada at the time, and he made mention that the reason for the northern region lacking behind in the area of art is also because of the traditional preaching of what art represents. You are from a Muslim background. He said that you have done beyond what they could have imagined, even though they were the earliest to also attend KNUST in the painting and sculpture department. You have done like exceedingly well in terms of changing the cultural perception of art in other region. Would you say that the religion also played a role in kind of taking us a step backwards when it comes to exploring art?
I think it has always been the case. It's not just also in Islam, but in this part of the world also Christianity also plays a heavy role, because when we're in school, in uni, there were a lot of students who wouldn't practice, or they wouldn't practice art fully because of their religious backgrounds, because it always held them back. Their parents would think that maybe they were, for instance, if an artist wants to make work that somehow explores, let's say, the mystical or something like that, and he's from a Christian background, maybe due to religious reasons he wouldn't want to explore that. But for me, I've always thought that it's very important for us to be able to at least go beyond just the physical. We need a lot of people to enter into the metaphysical, fictional, in order to be able to create ideas or forms that would inspire us way beyond.
When you look at the cultural aspect, will it give us an opportunity? I know the the the, the silo
Hmm.
is already bringing us back to Ghana relationship to Russia.
Hmm.
Is it something that can revive Ghana's relationship with Russia in terms of labor, in terms of art, and even just normal conversations between the two countries?
Yes, no, certainly I think it can, on a much more massive scale, because the Nkrumah is just one of a dozen structures that were built in a time. You have the nuclear plant in Accra, you have the monuments in Accra, you have the silos across the country, and many other infrastructures, reservoirs and all that. Yeah, so between the early 60s and the mid 60s, when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, of course there was a lot of work that happened as a result of collaboration between between Eastern Europe and here, which included countries like Russia, former Yugoslavia, Poland and all that. Yeah, so for me that is very important. The, the excavation or the exhumation of the silo is just a way for us to be able to trace back certain histories and to open up maybe certain portals which can lead us into different timelines that we can somehow re-establish existing connections, but not just those connections from that era, but also use that as a way to make new connections. So for instance, bringing the idea of getting a loan from the Ghana museums to bring the Egyptian mummy and coffin and the Sputnik was very important, because the coffin is coming from 4,000 years ago, and the Sputnik is coming from the same era in which the silo was being built. But as the silo was being built to somehow think about food cultivation, issues regarding land in terms of the planet, the Sputnik was more geared towards space exploration and all that. So for me, it's important to be able to connect those two things, which were happening at the same time in different spaces by the same people, to somehow combine it into one space. So now you almost have, in science, you have a singularity which is being created. So now it's almost as if we've opened a black hole in the silo. But interestingly enough, I thought the inside of the silo there was already a black hole, because the sand that we took out of it and all that when we were exhuming it, I thought was already at the event horizon. Yeah, because in science, when a massive star collapses and it turns into a black hole, it sucks everything around it. Even when light goes into it, it can't escape. And sometimes it's believed that within a black hole there is a wormhole that leads to other parts of the universe, or even to a multiverse or something like that. So for me, I thought that it's quite interesting that the under of the silo is already like a black hole which has just been there, which has all these things sucked into it, like bats which are living there. It has created all these different multi-species dimensions, like amphibians and all kinds of things living there. Yeah, and then you exhume it, and then you use the sand from the exhumation to create a platform which this coffin from another age and era sits on. You have the Sputnik hanging on it. You have videos by artists who have never shown on the continent before. A first collaboration, which is the first of its kind in the West African region, and mostly the country. So when I was acquiring the building, or when I used to visit the building, I used to imagine all these multiple potentialities, but I didn't know whether it could be actualized or not. So when we opened the Nkrumah Volno on the 30th, it was almost like it was almost like an impossibility which had come into being. Yeah. Of course, now the building, we've closed the exhibition again because water is going down. So that is going back to the issue of labor, that is the precarious nature of it, that sometimes when you do it, you have to come back to it, and you come back to it again and again and again. And art leaves room for all these forms of thinking and possibilities.
Like Dr. Bernard said in our November last year podcast, that labor never rests.
Yes, exactly.
So it seems that all the time you have to come back to it and come back to it.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the Egyptian mummy and the space shuttle.
Yeah.
Let's first talk about the space shuttle. One of the pictures I was looking through during the opening, that was just some weeks ago or days ago, was a space shuttle. I saw a little girl just standing and watching it, and that picture was very stunning. Because we have this, we hardly have young people going closer to such an important innovation and scientific creation in our locality here. We usually see it on TV and all that. When you look at the space shuttle, and not just the body, but when you look inside, you actually feel the tension, the nervousness, and all that feeling that a pilot actually goes through when being in this shuttle and shooting at the star, looking up towards. Would you say that it is also going to open up the scientific spark in young people around here, to let them know that it can be them, they can imagine themselves inside that whole space shuttle?
Yes.
Will it spark that scientific conversation in their head and imaginations?
Yes. No, certainly it will. The plan of bringing the space shuttle was not just to bring it as an exhibition tool, but also just to bring it as a point to somehow bring different histories together. The Nkrumah Volne, I don't see it just as a building, I see it as an object. It's as valid as the space shuttle or as the Sputnik. It's just that one can contain the other. Yeah. So in the case of the space shuttle, the plan is to be able to do like a series of scientific workshops here, where we'll collaborate with, let's say, welders, carpenters, engineers, and build one. Actually.
Wow.
A replica, but not like we can build ones that actually kids can go inside, build a space suit, blah blah blah. So there'll be a workshop series that will be done actually with the schools here. Wow. So we can do it and then actually build what's the name? Do a workshop with it where maybe we can get the hydraulic system of, let's say, a car. The trucks, and then put it in the ground, and then we can actually we can design it in such a way that when the space shuttle is on it, when the shuttle nose is on it, it can actually go up and down. Or we can do it and one day we can bring a crane to come and lift it up in the air whilst the kids are in it. So there are sometimes art involves using certain innovations. And in my work, I've used cranes and all kinds of things for work, hanging systems, hanging large, like the jute sacks and all that. So what prevents you actually from using it to be able to create, let's say, a workshop or an experience like this, an unforgettable experience like this, in the term of like the space shuttle? And even just buying normal helmets, transforming them into like using foil or cloth, transforming them into space suits, buying special materials, converting them into space suits. Like, so it will involve a lot of things. It will involve sewing, it will involve welding, carpentry. So it's actually, we are coming back to the issue of labor again. So for me, when I look at people doing their ordinary everyday today things, I just don't look at it as a utilitarian thing. Oh, a welder is just doing let's say a gate for someone, or I'm trying to find out how can we reconstitute this form, this thing, this energy, or this labor that is going into the work, and what are the political implications of it when the form shifts or changes into something that somehow can allow for maybe a certain evolution within maybe another generation.
Wow. And the Egyptian mummy. Here like I was telling Solomon, we hardly have that deep conversation with the dead. When you are dead and buried, that is it. That's the end of the conversation. We don't talk about afterlife. We hardly talk about afterlife. The mummy, when you come down and look at it, those of us who are privileged to see mummy movies or read about Egyptian history, it kind of threw us back into that same era, whereby like these discoveries were made, or those actually performing these sacrifices, and how they bury, like how they take care of their dead and all that. And when you look at the silo where it's positioned, there is some light at the top that
Yes.
kind of
Come here.
Was it accidental or intentional to actually put it there and mold blocks from the sand that was actually excavated from the building?
No, it was very intentional. You know, it's a long curated project. It's been a year in making.
Yeah.
And some of those ideas, they just don't come to you. You have to work towards them. You know, the lights, first and foremost, the lights that was put there was very intentional. We bought the lights from Accra, spotlights.
Okay.
I have this spotlight at Red Clay in my kitchen.
Okay.
It was there. And then for the last exhibition during the test show,
yes,
we thought we could get those spotlights and then spotlight some of the paintings, but we couldn't. So in this case, we decided why not spotlight the coffin underneath the space. Originally, the coffin was supposed to go underneath the space where the Sputnik is.
All right.
But later on, Salome and I decided why not put it underneath where that void is,
yes,
where the hole is,
yes.
The architectural detail, and put the Sputnik in the middle.
Yeah.
And there we could use the sand that we excavated from the bottom to build the platform, the plinth which it will sit on. And it was very important artistically because when we were excavating or exhuming the sand from the building, I took a series of photographs that Ibrahim and the other guys, when they were actually using the pickers to cut through the sand to remove. And there were all these multiple layers where you saw like rubbers and all kinds of things. So I wanted to reproduce that in a way that this time around the sand, we've used it in molding blocks and we put it in a silo and we place the coffin on it. So it's almost as if you look at those two images together, it's almost as if when we excavated the sand, the coffin, the coffin emerged. So it was a very important narrative that I thought that we needed to establish, because in relation to even how we look at materials like earth, like when archaeologists are excavating like sites, they are not so much interested in the earth, they are more interested in the objects that they find. But I wanted the earth to be as important as the object itself. That's why we combined both. So when you go to the silo and you see the coffin, the coffin is as important as the earth. So both of them are in the same. So it comes back to the idea of the singularity again. We are collapsing the two things into one. Now, for us, and speaking for myself also, it's all about ideas at the end of the day, and what those ideas can become, the transformational qualities of those ideas, how it can transform a generation to think differently about spaces around them, the experiences they provide and all that. So the light quality was very important. You know, the light idea came from even the silo itself. At a certain particular time, throughout the day, because of the various openings in the building, when the sun is moving around the building, the light forms takes different shapes in the building. Particularly in the basement, at a certain time of the day, precisely between 4:01 and 4:05 in the evening PM, there's a ray of light, a very thin ray of light that hits the basement of the silo. And you can see at that point, you can see light as a physical material quality within this, and it's a very short time window, like it's just a 4-minute window. And I tried photographing that for the press statement a few times, and sometimes I would miss it just because I was a minute late. So time, the specificity of time quality, it was very important. So I thought that we could replicate that by using that as a material quality to somehow highlight the coffin. And also the spiritual aspect is very important, of course, in terms of what it represents, both in historical context and also now. And it's not just the coffin. You realize that there's a stairway leading from the basement going to the upper basement, the wooden one. So that staircase is also coming from Sekondi Takoradi. It's one of the original wooden staircases that was built by the British, also as part of the railway infrastructure there. I collected it just as the cabinet as red clay. But when I collected it some time ago, I hadn't bought the silo yet, and I didn't know what to do with it. And when we exhumed the silo, and I realized that, I have this staircase, maybe that could be used too. And when I brought it there, it was perfect. It was almost as if they were made for each other. Meanwhile, they exist almost 50 years apart from each other. The staircase was made 50 years before the silo was built. But now, 100 and something years later, we're able to combine those things in the same space.
So perfect.
Exactly. So then again, singularity. And we highlighted also the staircase. There's also a light, that one of those lights there. So in the evening when we put it on, it also highlights it just the way as the casket is. Yes, it's also highlighted.
All right. Again, like just the Russian one, how is this enhancing our relationship with the Egyptian? Because recently they also had this excavation and all that, and they moved these particular mummies to a different
place,
where you've also moved one of these to a different place.
Yes.
How is this going to how will I say, improve the relationship between Ghana and Egypt? Not just political relations that we are all privy to, but also historical and artistic relationship between Ghana and Egypt.
Yeah, I guess for me, all the institutions I'm creating, the basic idea of these institutions is to foster new relationships, like the collaboration with Denmark, with Aarhus Museum like this. It shouldn't have been possible that in Tamale, of all places, like a collaboration like this happened. It didn't happen in Accra. Or it didn't happen anywhere else. I think, and it can happen anywhere else too, depending on the attitude that goes into the foundation of an institution. The attitude is very important. Yes. Of course, I wish that there could be traveling shows where Egypt could loan Ghana materials for like exhibitions. Aarhus loaned us video works, photographs and others for the show that we are doing at both SCCA, Red Clay and Nkrumah. But I'm also thinking, because there's one of the missing things is also the Kuma figures from the Savannah region, which is predominantly in the collection of the Museum of Archaeology in Legon. You know, a lot of old historical materials was excavated here in the former northern region.
Okay, all right. I've heard that was
and a lot of them go back to even the 5th century.
Wow.
Way before Dagombes or Ashantis or people settled here. So, you know, historically, people migrated and settled here way like a few centuries after Christ, you know. So those exist. So I have been following those for some time now. There is an older man in Tamale, but he's from the I think West Mampo City. Yeah, lawyer Ben Saibu. Yeah, he was an MP during Rawlins's era, and so he's dedicated most of his life to actually these excavated materials and archaeological things. So a lot of them have been in Accra at the museum in their collection, and also some of them have been to Manchester and other museums for exhibitions. So the idea of also excavating buying the Nkrumah was to create a space where these archaeological materials could find a home here. So within this year, I'm also working on bringing these objects from Accra here on permanent, for them to be installed here permanent, as like for them as part of the museum. Yes. So not just. So within that conversation, we also came across recently they excavated like a mummified body of a queen in one of those areas. And so and it was intact.
Wow.
Yes. So what actually prevents us from actually maybe having materials like this within institutional settings that can somehow inspire us to think differently about our own cultures? Yes. And we're always talking about ideas of repatriation and all that. But this Nkrumah that we've excavated, exhumed, was, for me, I saw it as a form of repatriation. It's not, this time it's not going somewhere. It's here, but we are taking it from here and bringing it back so we can actually bringing it back to life, so that we can actually experience it.
So not going resurrected.
Yes.
Supposed to be
It's some kind of a Lazarus. It was a Lazarus project. To bringing it back to life. Not to say that it was dead. It was not dead, because when it was all the bats and fishes and snakes and frogs, toads that were living in it created a new whole life or ecosystem. But there was a divide between the human experience and that, and I wanted to create a new set of conditions that could allow both to exist within the same space.
And it's like I know I had this conversation with Ajua,
Yes.
the rep for the
Yes.
Ghana Museum. How important is it for us, like things that are excavated here remain here? Because it's like when you talk about the Ghana Museum, these archaeological places, until people like you or those in the arts department, they get to see these things, they get to experience these things. But a regular person like me hardly have the luxury, the time, the opportunity to actually go see these things.
Yes.
Meanwhile, they were from here. So how important is not just in Nkrumah Valley, but having institutions that can house things that are meant to be here, are found here.
Cave paintings and all kinds of things that exist here. Yeah, that we not had time to document. And the sad thing is that Ben Saibu, this lawyer, he's met all the presidents from Rawlins's time till now, but none of them have ever been interested in any of these things.
Wow.
Yeah. So that tells you the mindset that we are operating under. Yeah, so for us, when we're able to do these, bring these spaces back to life, let you forget about politics, like partisan politics or even just politics in general. Just in the physical, real world. Just thinking about ideas. Well, by bringing these things back to life, there's a shift in their thinking. And I think every society wants to be able to get to a point where the thinking shifts or transforms. You don't want your traditions to be perceived the same way they are for centuries or decades and decades to come. I think it's a complete sham and failure if it happens in that way. I think there has to be a shift. Of course, some people argue that when there's a shift, it somehow dilutes. But it's not that. When you are thinking about it in that way, then you might as well just travel back in time and become a Nazi or something. Yeah. There is nothing such as dilution of culture and all that. Culture transforms and it informs other things. And the spaces that we have here have very strong implications on how we experience our culture and how our culture transforms. Yeah, it's very, very, very important.
And I know I watched one of these series of Neil deGrasse Tyson about people who lived in Nigeria long before this modern Nigeria and all that. And it tells us a lot about the people that came before us and what has influenced certain culture, recent or current cultural practices. So this leads to my next set of questions under collaboration. This collaborative exhibition is doing. How is it going to, like, with Denmark? Now let's come to Denmark. We've talked about the Russian, we've talked about the British, we've spoken about the Egyptian. Denmark seems to be one of the countries with institutions that has been supportive to your work in one way or the other. We saw you win the Prince Claus Award. You've done some exhibitions there as well. They seem to be very supportive of SCCA inspired institutions. First of all, how did this relationship start?
Yeah, so Denmark, you're right. I've done a couple of projects in Denmark. I think the first exhibition project, the first time I went to Denmark was actually in 2012. I went for a project, there was a residency I was doing in Germany. And I traveled a bit. I went to Documenta 13. And then, which is like one of the biggest art exhibitions in the world. It's like considered the Olympics of our film. I went there to see the exhibition, and then afterwards I went to Spain to visit my aunt, and then I went from Spain straight to Denmark, and I stayed there for like a little over a week. I went back to Germany and then came home. And the next time I went there again was around 2014 for a research leading to a project. In 2015 I worked on a project there. In 2016 and I think I haven't been there since 2017 or so. So when SCCA was opened there was actually McCarthy from Hopping.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he had some. Yeah, he was the one who put me in touch with them. Yeah, because they had contacted him, asking whether they could get in touch with me. So they wanted to come to Tamale for a visit. So in I think at the beginning of last year, January, end of January, early February, yeah,
yes.
1st February, they came. Myself, I was coming back from New York at the time. So when I flew into Accra, the next morning, I took the next available flight and I came to Tamale. So I went straight to meet them at the hotel, and then we went to SCCA Red Clay. At the time, I hadn't bought the silo yet, so we didn't know anything about it. But of course, I told them it was part of an idea I was working on and all that. So subsequently, when they went back, they wrote me saying that they wanted to collaborate with us on this exhibition, blah blah blah. And I said, okay, sure, it sounds really promising, and let's explore it and see where it can lead to. So we started working on the ideas for the show, and it was supposed to be a 2-part exhibition. The first part, which will be a show concentrated in Denmark in their museum, called This Is Not Africa, Unlearn What You've Learned. And then the second one here, which we titled A Diagnosis of Time, Unlearn What You've Learned. And the first show would be artists from the diaspora living in the US, Africa, and Europe and other places, where they'll curate a show, and we would also select artists to be part of the show. So some of the artists from here and other places that we included in the show. And also, as part of the agreement, was that they will give us part of their collection, like video works, whatever, to be part of the exhibition here. And then I went a step further to say, okay, fine, why don't we also collaborate with the Ghana Museum to get the coffin, the Sputnik and other things into it, because the silo, at the time after they asked for the collaboration, I then now thought that, okay, fine, we can then now include the silo as one of the objects in the show. So I was very much bent on excavating the silo and then including it in the exhibition as one of the objects. Yeah, so for me, the silo was never really just a venue. It was almost like the objects that we were trying to, just as they were giving us loans on artworks, videos and other things which were coming here, we were also giving ourselves a loan of the silo. Yes, of somehow the asking for the silo to be also brought back to life. So even if people come here and the silo is empty, they can still go through the silo. It's an object in itself. So even if you don't see the coffin or the videos or anything, it's a building, it's a living building which has been almost wiped out of our history that we are trying to bring back to life here. Yeah.
And the artists that are collaborating, the ones from Ghana, how was the selection made?
Oh, some of them are colleagues from the university, like Tracy, Kelvin and Bernard. So we've known their works for so long. Bernard was my many years senior. Of course, when he was doing his PhD, I was doing my undergrad. I said undergrad, I was doing my master's. Bernard was Selom's teaching assistant in secondary school. When we were in secondary school. Not teaching assistant. Bernard did his service, national service at Presec. He went to Presec. But he didn't do his service he did his service at Pantine, the teaching hospital. But he used to go to Presec to go and teach. And Selom was in final year. The same year I was in 2005. Yeah. So that's how Selom knows Bernard from back then. But I came to know Bernard more as an artist later. So Kelvin was my mate from undergrad. Yeah, from 2006 to 2010. And Tracy was my many years junior. When I was doing my master's, she was doing her undergrad. So I became friends with her because of her work. I thought her work was really promising. And yeah, so yeah, those were, and we also invited some other artists from other countries to be part of the show. Yeah.
And the other artists from other countries, are they also going to be visiting soon? Are they going to be having some discussions, some workshops here?
We wish and hope so. You know, it's as you know, I'm funding everything with my own resources. and times are hard. Because I've spent a lot even just buying this building and then making the show happen, and we're still working on it. So as and when there is funds, we can organize for something to happen. Already there is going to be workshops with Kelvin with his work, with Bernard Akwe Jackson with his performance and work, with Tracy, with Eric Jemfi with his photographs. And Eric's work wasn't presented in the show in Aarhus in Denmark, but here we invited him because we thought his work was very important to the context. And also the manifestation of his work now in terms of the forms that he's taking wasn't really there when we did the original selection. So for this one we thought that it was really important for the work to be shown. So
I like that you mentioned funds, funding and all that. How are you able to manage these three institutions with hopes of even adding another one? That's you spoke about the Russian cemetery. Yes.
Yeah.
So how are you funding all these three institutions and future ones?
Well, for now I've just been funding it by the small sales of works that I do here and there, or when I give a lecture.
Okay.
Like some of these, or I get an artist fee. Okay. So for instance, the commission I'm doing for the Manchester International Festival, they'll give me a commission, like a fee. So the fee actually goes into payments of salaries. This collaboration we did with Aarhus, there was a fee that we were supposed to give us, curatorial fees, as a part, as part of the curating. Salome and I agreed that we wouldn't take the money because both of us are using our labor, but because we know that the institution we are basically doing what's the name? We are basically run an institution which is not funded by anyone or any entity. So we both agreed that we're going to commit the money into paying our salaries and all that. And other things. Of course, now it's more in the past. It would have been very easy to do this because I was funding most of this with like sales from commercial shows that I'll do. But I haven't done any commercial show in the last 3 years. So it's been very hard. But at least this year I have 2 or 3 major commercial shows I'm yet to do. So when I do it this year, it will give us another kind of economic backing, which we can finish the silo and do whatever we want to do it finally. For instance, raising the other parts, the floors, and putting the airplane at the top of it, and also like finalizing the Russian cemeteries. But there are also these buildings around the cities, small buildings. Like when you go to the villages, they have these old storage spaces, warehouses which have been abandoned. So I'm thinking about converting them into like small cultural spaces, where it could be satellite spaces which could do outreach programs, cinema programs, classroom projects in those communities, mostly in the rural areas. So it's all, I think, and I was also thinking that in the future it would be good to somehow open a trust, some kind of a trust which I will gift some works of mine to, which every once in a while, like every year, the trust can maybe give, let's say, offer one of those works to like a gallery or something, and then the money could be used to fund all the institutions. Because all you need for the funding is to pay salaries. And that's what I'm most concerned about. So how to be able to get the salaries, because the institutions are done, and it's not like it's a profit-making institution. So once the institutions are up and running, and we can get money in order just to do upkeep, if the bulb is damaged, to change it, pay salaries. If a pipe is leaking, you fix it. Like those things. Cleaning. Those sometimes they are very basic things. But the most important thing is first to establish the institution. Once you establish it, you find ways of going. Even if for a month or 2 you haven't paid salaries, eventually you will be able to do it. So it takes time. It's not very smooth, but it takes some kind of commitment.
And era of Kudri. How did you guys survive? Even though you I think this is the second show in the COVID pandemic. How were you able to come up with it, and how did you survive during the whole shutdown? Because that means no travels, no work,
no work, nothing. But our people were here, They were we're cleaning the center, the space every day. Though we were not having any show in the beginning of the COVID because no one knew there were so many restrictions. So when the restrictions came down a bit, that's when we opened Doter's show. But throughout that period, we never asked any of the workers to go home, or I just kept paying them, because coming back to the issue of labor again, these people have put in a lot into the institution, into helping to manage and to keep it going. I think it's unfair to be able to let them go during a time of crisis. I think that we've always been in crisis. Yeah, so it wasn't like there were institutions in America and other places who were letting workers go because they said they were not making enough profit. But we are not making any profits at all. So if we can keep our workers, why can't those institutions who are still making profits, who think they are not making enough profit? So at the end of the day, it comes back down also to greed. A lot of institutions are very greedy and also very insensitive to the workers people that they work with. So because these people who are working with you, it's like their life is connected to the institution, like an umbilical cord.
Yes.
Yeah. So just because a mother is hurt doesn't say that she's going to cut yes, exactly. Yeah. So you have to find a way to sustain these things. It can only happen through sacrifice and like a certain deep understanding of, let's say, the political and socio-economic conditions that are related to the people that you work with.
Okay, all right. And this show, what is this is the third show in the second or 2.5 years you established. Yeah. The third show. Can you just explain this whole show?
Yeah. So Arrows, this show, A Diagnosis of Time, Unlearn What You Have Learned, as I mentioned, was born out of the first show, which is This Not Africa, Unlearn What You Have Learned, which is in Aarhus, in Denmark. Yeah. But with this show, the idea was to have a collection of international art in Tamale.
All right.
The first time that would have happened on a scale like this, and also just as a basic thing. Yeah. But the show wasn't just meant to be a traditional show like the two other ones we've had, which were mainly retrospectives. Yes. But this one was somehow to introduce our audiences to different forms of work and different forms of materials, like photography. All the different photographs in the show are printed differently, they are treated differently, the subject matter within those photographs, the background of the artist. Like in Red Clay, there's one of the works, Olafur Eliassen's work, which is the two lights which is projecting onto the objects, which gives you this sense of shadows and illusion perceptions when you're in the room. Yes. And also we have this other work which has the neon sign, which has like the bamboo growing within the room with the lights and all that. So for us it was very important that we created a show that somehow allowed us to be able to look at time as an essential material. Yeah. Not just looking at works from different areas, but because it's historical, it's history that you're making. You are somehow creating a new culture. So for us that was very important, to be able to create, let's say, a new culture through this collaboration, through the film and everything that exists. Yeah.
And the reception, Selon was saying that it's always amazing to have people around here. Like when they come, even if the work is not ready yet, they wait around. I remember during the opening in November 30th, we even had other people asking Dr. Bernard how they can help. They just don't want to come and stand again.
Yes.
Opening these three institutions, what have you observed about the reception from the people who come here to look at the arts, to look at these amazing things you and the institutions are doing? What has been the reception you've observed from the people?
It's been very good, actually. I think there is something quite special here in Tamale or around here in the region. People are very kind. I'm always complaining about how ruthless and callous people are, but fundamentally people are very kind here. When people come to the show, so for instance here, when they came and we were installing the coffin, I was sweating and dripping and all that. There was a lady who was offering me, like, I didn't have my handkerchief with me. She was giving me like tissue to clean up and all that. And also, some of them were helping us with the coffin in terms of getting it down and all that, and many other things. So I think people are interested. They want to be part of the process, you know. You hardly go to a museum or an institution and see and witness most of this. Yeah, so to be able to be part of it is actually quite exciting. So for us, we think that we need to actually encourage that more by organizing events and also by organizing projects that actually would involve more people in the process of making. Yeah.
Right. And the Dutch ambassador visited.
The Danish ambassador.
Danish ambassador.
Yes.
Okay.
At the opening, I made a mistake by stumbling and saying, "Oh, Dutch," but it's Danish. Yes, Danish.
Okay. So this was the Danish.
Yes.
Right. Danish ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was like some of the wow moments he actually told you about after visiting your three institutions?
Mm-hmm. He was actually here like a month and a half ago, visiting. Yeah. He wanted to see the institution before the opening, and we're still working on setting up. There was still a lot of water in the silo where we're still pumping out, and for some reason he didn't quite believe that we're going to get everything ready in time for the show. Of course, when he came, we're still doing some work. So he and I even made a joke about the fact that, he said it looked that just a sheer amount of work, he didn't think it was possible, but he's very happy that we still managed to make it happen, to open it and all that. Yeah, but he's just been generally impressed about the ideas that we are working with and the sense of commitment, and also sense of commitment and energy that we've put into the whole project. So both here and SCC and then Red Clay. I think here more so because it almost seems like to do this you must almost be crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the gods must be crazy type of scenario. Yeah, but I kept telling that's what he took a lot from it, that art is not just about art is not a snapshot.
Yes.
Art is a process, and sometimes failure and all of its siblings come along with it. So if an exhibition is opening and it's not clean and perfect because everything is hanged, then you also have to understand the socio-economic and political conditions that also have made it to be that. So I think that he quite understood that, and for me that was very important. I think a lot of people always go to institutions hoping everything will be perfect, but it's not always going to be so. Yeah. So for me, that was one of the things that I thought was very important for him to like take out of the whole. Yeah.
Okay. And the kids, the opening day, there are a lot of children here.
Yeah.
Some of them have grew up with this thing.
Yes.
They interacted with it differently.
Yes, differently.
Now they have to interact with it differently.
Yes.
Here. What have you observed so far about the kids and here, their relationship with it earlier and now?
Yeah, they seem to be a lot more comfortable with it, because during the opening a lot of kids were here. I saw pictures of people taking videos, pictures of the kids, like some with their hands leaning on the coffin. Of course it's not supposed to be like that, but the idea that people were not afraid of this, because there are a lot of myths surrounding the building and people were generally afraid. No one wanted to be associated with Nkrumah. But the fact that they are suddenly so confident to even go underneath and explore with the bats and all that, I thought it was actually a very good note and a very good step to go in, direction to go in. Of course, historically, most of them would only come here to come and, excuse me to say, shit. Yes, to go to ease themselves. But now it's a different point of, it's like now they are here to feed their brains. Yes, so that transition for me, I guess, is very important, and for them to be able to at least acknowledge that transition even in themselves and come, I think it's a very positive note and very positive change that we would have wished for.
Finally, on this forum, the next chapter is media collaboration or media enthusiasm towards not just the Nkrumah Valley but the three projects so far. How do you see it, the media collaboration in the region, both the traditional media and digital media?
No, I think it's been okay. Yeah, well, of course, I wish there could be more. Yourself, you've been very supportive and very instrumental in like pushing some of these ideas out there. But I think generally it's a bit slow because it's very hard for people to understand most of these ideas or things that we're working on because everyone thinks that you're crazy. Yeah, so which is good actually because sometimes we need a bit of craziness in the world. But it's something that we have to work on a lot more. I don't think I've been particularly invested so much into like promoting the institution. It's something that I have to do more and more. Yeah, for me, I guess I'm always so much interested more in the work because I find a lot of institutions who are doing very little work, but they spend a lot of time just hyping and promoting. For me, I'm more interested in the work, so just do the work, and once in a while you post something on social media, once in a while you do an interview here and there. But I think it's very, very important that we really spread this, particularly now that we have these three institutions with this exhibition, so as many people can see it as possible because it's something that is historic. And since it's on for 6 months, we can try as much as possible to encourage a lot of people living in the city to be able to see it.
Okay. And the journalists themselves, is it that probably they don't know how to strike the conversation with you in the area of art? And also, when you speak to those who are always around, those who try to have a conversation with you, do you feel like they're a bit limited in terms of questioning because they don't have that kind of interest in art, unlike when you watch international media, the likes of CNN, DW, other people, those that are usually sent to cover this program are more interested in artistic stuff and all that?
Yeah, well, when in Western media, there are people who trained journalists who cover just art.
Yeah.
Whereas here, there are journalists who might be interested in the art exhibition that you're doing and just want to cover it.
Yes.
So they don't have a lot of experience in, let's say, interviewing artists. So when they are asking questions, they sometimes get very carried away, or they tend to miss the point. Yeah, you can't really talk about politics with them. As soon as you start talking about politics to them, then they reduce it down to partisan politics. But politics is just the relationship between things. Yeah, so they ought to. Both of us need to work. We need to work on, let's say, engaging more with the media, and they also need to work more on educating themselves about ways in which they can understand art or have conversations with artists and cultural practitioners and other people alike.
All right. I think we're done for today. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Ibrahim Mahama. Oh, should I say Dr. Ibrahim Mahama?
Mr. The doctor will come soon. To come very soon.
It seems you're still hiding it. Well, you're done with your PhD.
No. I haven't finalized it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been a truant student, but I will.
All right.